Hey, Honors English 1. We're studying the Cask of Amontillado. This video goes over some of the basics to help guide your study. Shout out to the former students that I had that are now juniors that created the basis of this presentation that I just edited a bit. All right, so we're talking about the Cask of Amontillado by Edgar Allan Poe. Amontillado is wine, and a cask is the barrel that the wine is stored in. So just to understand the title there, Poe is known for his creepy, pretty dark stories. Usually students have read one or more of his stories before they read this one. So The Raven is one people are familiar with, as is The Telltale Heart. Those seem to be the top two ones that people have read already. All right, so reviewing the plot, the exposition in terms of the setting, it is dusk in Italy during Carnival season. And Carnival is like a week-long party. The atmosphere is very light. People wear costumes, as you can see in the picture here. And there is a contrast that is set there with the juxtaposition of the other setting in which the majority of the story takes place, which is in catacombs, which are like dark underground tunnels built. They're real things that exist in Italy, and they are where people store the remains of their family. So the other element of exposition is characterization. And so we have two characters, Montresor and Fortunato. When we read about them, we're looking to see what pre-existing conflict between these characters is mentioned in the exposition. So there are two quotes here about each one, both from page 212. And when we're thinking about the quotes, what things we can think about are making inferences about the characters from what is told to us here about them, and then trying to identify any literary terms that fit to describe them. So Montresor is our narrator. So it's first person narration. So this is him speaking. It must be understood that neither by word nor deed had I given Fortunato cause to doubt my goodwill. I continued, as was my plan, to smile to his face, and he did not perceive that my smile now was at the thought of his destruction. So I've changed a little bit of the language to make it a little bit easier to understand. So we can see here he's the type of person who smiles as he thinks of someone being destroyed. And there are some inferences I think we can make about really at least we can say his very much dislike, his disdain, his hatred for at least the character that he's speaking about here in this quote, which is actually Fortunato. So because Montresor is the narrator, everything we learn about every character in every situation is through his point of view. So even what we learn about Fortunato is filtered through the lens of our narrator, Montresor, who we know doesn't like him. So about Fortunato, he had a weak point, this Fortunato, although in other regards, he was a man to be respected. He prided himself on his expert knowledge in wine. In the matter of old wines, he was sincere. So Fortunato is a flat character because we really only know this about him. Really, we know nothing else. We really know he likes wine. He talks about it. He's very excited by it, and he drinks it throughout the entire story. So he's flat. And then he's also static because there's nothing about him that changes as a result of this story besides his I want to say aliveness, but that's not the right word. So the inciting incident that begins the rising action of this story is actually introduced to us in the very beginning. So Montresor narrates, the 1,000 injuries of Fortunato I had tolerated as best I could, but when he ventured upon insult, I vowed revenge. I must not just punish him, but punish him with no chance of ever being caught. So our inciting incident here actually is when he tells us directly that he's vowing revenge against Fortunato because Fortunato insulted him. So his vow for revenge sends him on a quest to find it. So here's a series of tasks or a series of steps that he takes in order to complete his goal of destroying Fortunato. So he lures him down into the catacombs by asking him if he'll taste a rare wine, and plays on his pride there. And so Fortunato agrees. And so they both walk into the catacombs, going further and further, seeking out this alleged Amontillado that they're going towards. And Montresor is actively giving Fortunato wine as they walk. And so Fortunato, we can clearly see many signs he's getting intoxicated the further and further they go into the catacombs. So Montresor suggests that they go back because Fortunato is coughing, and he makes this big deal about Fortunato's health. But Fortunato says no, he is stubborn and he wants to taste this wine, and he wants to be the one who tells Montresor that it's good or not. And so Montresor and Fortunato finally reach the Amontillado, and I use that in quotes because the next thing we have is our climax. So the ultimate moment of luring Fortunato into the catacombs is when Montresor basically backs him into it's called a niche is the word in the text, which is like a little cutout in a room or a hallway. And so this has clearly been planned. There's lots of details in the story that tell us that Montresor has taken great care in planning out this revenge. But he is able to padlock Fortunato to the wall of the catacomb, locking him there. So remember that he also is no one to resist because he is very intoxicated. And so the quote here represents this idea. So in an instant, he reached the back of the small space cut into the wall, and finding his progress stopped by the rock, stood stupidly bewildered. So that's Fortunato. A moment more, and I had chained him to the granite, throwing the links of a padlock around his waist. It was but the work of a few seconds to secure it. He was too much astounded to resist. So he was no one to put up with or to put a fight against Montresor. So here is the climax, because we ultimately are able to see, this is how the revenge is going to be enacted. It has happened. And so then we watch this falling action of, here's the quote from 216. I busied myself among the pile of bones, throwing them aside. I soon uncovered a quantity of building stone and mortar. So that was already there, so pre-planned. With these materials and with the aid of my trowel, I began vigorously to wall up the entrance of the small space where he was chained to the wall, right? So he's taking bricks and he is building up a wall to enclose Fortunato into a tiny crevice deep inside the catacombs. And then the resolution here is when Montresor tells us, for the half of a century, no mortal has disturbed them, meaning the bones of Fortunato, or like the bricks that are enclosing him. And then he says, in pace requiescat, which is Latin for rest in peace. So a little bit creepy. Okay, so other literary devices that are important. One of the ways that Poe builds suspense is by foreshadowing. And foreshadowing is a technique where you give little clues about what is going to happen in the story. And the reason that authors use it is because it creates tension. And we like tension as readers. We don't like to feel tension in our lives, but tension in a story is what compels us to go forward. We want to find out what's happening. So there's a couple ways that Poe builds or includes foreshadowing. So he uses symbolism to foreshadow. And so there's the family crest and the Montresor family crest and motto that is discussed. Nemo me impune lacesset. Oh, my Latin teacher would be so disappointed, but again, it's Latin. And then the way that Fortunato looks when he is first introduced. So his description, he had on a tight-fitting party-striped dress, and his head was topped by the conical cap and bells. So he is dressed like a jester or a fool is another term for it. So someone who used to come into king and queen's courts and then entertain them by making a fool of themselves. So that just ironically happens to be what Fortunato is dressed as when Montresor meets him. And then lastly, Fortunato's name translates to the fortunate one in Italian, which is ironic because he is in no way fortunate, as his bones rest in peace. So that one kind of bridges into the other way that the author creates foreshadowing is through irony, and all different types of irony. There's the dramatic irony presented right in the beginning, which is when Montresor tells us straight to our faces in very plain language, I am, one, planning revenge against this man, and two, I am smiling in his face while I am actively planning and executing his complete destruction. And so that detail that we get right away tells us that we're working with an unreliable narrator here, right? So that's the point of view, first person point of view through an unreliable narrator means we know we can't trust him. Psychologically, we're not sure he's sound. We definitely know he is devious to other characters, so we can assume he is devious to us, although he is telling us the truth here and being very honest about murdering this man. So that dramatic irony means that we know that this is all a dramatic plan for revenge, but Fortunato does not. And that is the definition of dramatic irony, when the reader knows something that a character in the story does not. And that again builds tension. There's verbal irony used here. When Montresor and Fortunato are down in the catacombs, Montresor is very concerned and about Fortunato's health because he's coughing. And he keeps saying like, oh, you're such an important man. You're a respected man, as I once was. He slips that in there, but says like, I can't have you sick. Let's turn around. Let's go back. Again, we know because the very beginning established this, that he doesn't mean any of this. He wants this man to die, but he's two-faced. And so there's some more foreshadowing evidence that this is going to end poorly for Fortunato. And then there's situational irony, the opposite of what we would expect, which is actually present in the setting of the story. So the fact that there's a happy, lighthearted party atmosphere carnival happening at the top. If you like imagine the setting is the carnival on top and then like a line and then the catacombs underneath. So it is ironic that when there's a festival, a happy festival going on above, that there's a devious murder plot, revenge murder plot happening below. It is the opposite of what we would expect for what the atmosphere above is. I hope this helps you guys. There's way more to talk about. Make sure you read the story. And I love this story. Thank you for watching. I hope this helped.